This video is brought to you by John Robson Guitar Tuition. If you enjoy the content, please consider supporting the channel by enrolling on a course, purchasing some guitar lessons or a t-shirt, or you can join my Patreon. Now, on with the show. Hello chaps, welcome once again to John Robson Guitar Tuition. As always, and especially at the moment, I do hope you're well. You remember last week, well maybe you remember, I did a video where I was talking about 5 albums from my favourite artists that just didn't kind of grab me the way their material usually does. So this week I thought it'd be interesting to do the opposite of that. 5 albums from artists who I really don't get, or from genres that I really don't get, that somehow or other made an impression on me. So let's get straight into it with
Rattle and Hum by U2.
Yes, now under normal circumstances I really don't have a lot of time for U2, largely because of their lead singer Paul Hewson. Sorry, Bono, we're supposed to call him, aren't we? I just find him not exactly the kind of chap who practices what he preaches, Make poverty history. Really? Well, you've made it history for yourself, haven't you, mate? Squirreling your money away in dodgy, shady tax havens, whilst preaching about how to live a virtuous life. Anyway, we're not going to go down that route. Musically, I found them uninteresting and not particularly, something that floated my boat. But this album, I have a rule, you see. If I hear a single off an album and that single impresses me enough, then I will possibly go out and buy the album. Then if I hear 2 singles off the album and both impress me, kind of well enough, then that's it. Definitely I'm going to buy the album. And the first 2 songs I heard from Rattle and Hum were the B.B. King one, When Love Comes to Town, and Angel of Harlem. And I love those songs in 10-foot tall letters. I absolutely do. Fantastic, fantastic stuff. So I went out and bought the album. And as I'm sure you know, the album itself is like a mixture of live versions of their existing previous songs rather, and some new material. And the thing that this album did was it kind of made me appreciate their earlier catalogue via the live versions on this Rattle and Hum album. So I still wouldn't describe myself as a U2 fan. I wouldn't go that far. I don't have any of their other albums, but when the mood takes me, I still occasionally listen to this album and genuinely enjoy it. So there you go. Next.
Number of the Beast by Iron Maiden.
Now it has to be said that by and large I never really got heavy metal. It's something to do with all of the Tolkien-esque Dungeons and Dragons lyrics and, the sort of amount of anger and aggression that's in the average metal tune, especially kind of the modern stuff, it seems to me. I mean, I'm not the world's most placid lad, as you know, but, I find even I tend to get a little bit, alienated by a lot of the out-and-out rage that's in a lot of metal stuff. And while we're on the subject of metal, what's this bunny rabbit thing about, that this sort of started happening? I started noticing it at some point in the mid to late 80s. And, I've never really got that. What's that all about? It's like, as I say, it just reminds me of that thing you used to do when you were a kid, making a shadow puppet of a bunny rabbit. Anyway, that all aside, I don't know what it is about this album. Actually, I think I do know what it is. It's got all of the kind of, the kind of Dungeons and Dragons and, evil Satan kind of stuff going on. But it's full of humour as well. I get the feeling that there's a smile on the face of everybody in the studio that's taking part in this album. You get the feeling that they're enjoying themselves in a way that I don't often hear on a lot of metal songs and or metal albums rather. And it's just, I can't put this album on and not bang me head at least a little bit to it. So yeah. The odd metal album does slip through. There's another one later that we're going to talk about. And this is one album that, I don't own any other Iron Maiden, but I do own this one and listen to it regularly and thoroughly enjoy it. Next.
From the Fires by Greta Van Fleet.
Okay, indeed. Now, on paper, this album shouldn't really be on my radar at all, because if you don't know who Greta Van Fleet are, they are a bunch of young lads who make a noise that sounds a heck of a lot like Led Zeppelin. And I'm not the world's biggest Led Zeppelin fan. I mean, I don't mind them, I've got a couple of albums, but, that they're a long way from being the top of the list of albums I'd run back into a burning building to rescue. Let's put it that way. But the other thing that I really can't get along with very well usually is when there is a band who seem like they're doing their absolute best to sound like an earlier band, another band. A band called Airborne springs to mind, who sound exactly like AC/DC. I don't know if you've ever come across them. And my mates were kind of, when they first came out, oh dear me, years ago, people were saying to me, yeah, oh, they're fantastic. They sound just like AC/DC. So if you like AC/DC, you'll like these guys. And I thought, well, yeah, but if I want to listen to AC/DC, I'll listen to the real thing, not, a band that sound a bit like them or a lot like them. But yet there's something about this album that in a way reminds me of, Shake Your Moneymaker, the Black Crowes' first album, which got, quite a lot of criticism at the time it came out for sounding very, very much like the Rolling Stones. But when I heard that album, I could tell that, yes, okay, they are influenced by the Stones, and yes, this is their first offering, and they're wearing the influences on their sleeve, and they'll probably mature into, something more of their own identity. And I genuinely feel this will be the case with Greta Van Fleet. When I was their age, if somebody had said I'd sounded like a world-famous rock band, I think I would have been quite pleased about that. And, it is encouraging to see and hear young lads like this who are, flying the flag for good old-fashioned, honest-to-goodness rock and roll, let's face it. So, yes, From the Fires by Greta Van Fleet, an album I love, even though on paper I shouldn't. Next.
The Black Album by Metallica.
Yes, indeed. Now, as I've said earlier, metal isn't really my thing, and I did lose interest in rock and metal for quite a while, actually, for about 10 years or so, from the mid-80s to about the mid-90s. And that was because, you would listen to the Friday rock show on the BBC, and it got to a point where every song was either kind of angry speed thrash noise with, devoid of any melodic content, so it seemed to me, anyway, or if it wasn't that, it was, kind of bubblegum pop, dressed up as rock music, all kind of spandex and hairspray and makeup and, Motley Crue basically is, what I'm thinking of there, that kind of thing. And, the things that struck me about both of those kind of approaches to rock music, let's call it, it just all seemed a bit immature. One was, just essentially teeny bopper music, pretending that it wasn't. And the other was just like kind of an angry toddler kind of chucking the toys out the pram. And, that's when I started going and listening to more blues and jazz and stuff like that. Then when I first started teaching the guitar back in the early 90s, one of my students, who I ran into the other day, now he's a bank manager, one of my students, he was a young lad then, and he said, oh, can I bring a song in to do next week? I said, yeah, of course you can. Well, what is it? He says, oh, it's Metallica. And my heart sank. Do we have to? Yes, I suppose we do. So anyway, he brought in the Black Album, and the song we did was actually Nothing Else Matters, the solo that we looked at yesterday. And yeah, loved it, and ended up going out and buying the album and thoroughly enjoying it. And I still listen to it today. And the thing that it showed me, that album, was that metal could have a degree of maturity and gravitas to it that I'd previously not heard in that style of music. It made something of a convert of me, almost. I wouldn't still describe myself as a metal fan, but the odd metal album does now reside in my collection, and I'm all the better for it, thank you very much. So there you go, the Black Album. Next.
Time Odyssey by Vinnie Moore.
Yes, now the whole sort of 80s neoclassical shred guitar thing, again, it's sort of passed me by. I can appreciate the technical skill, and it's all very commendable, but in terms of music that moves me emotionally, it tends not to do that by and large. It's just a little bit like the Baroque period composers that, guitarists like Yngwie and Tony McAlpine tend to reference. I find that music too kind of twiddly and too much ornamentation and filigree. And let's be blunt about this, there is a strong element of playing to the gallery. Look how fast I can play, that kind of thing. And it doesn't really, as I say, it doesn't really get me here in the way that, music that you love has to. Until I heard this album. Like a lot of people, I used to buy Guitar Player magazine in the 80s, and do you remember it used to come with one of those little free flexi-disc singles that you could stick on your turntable and hear a track or a sample from an album, and that's where I first encountered Vinnie Moores playing, and I thought, this guy is good. He's got all of that stuff that's on the Yngwie checklist, all the arpeggios and sweep picking and the speed and all that kind of stuff, but he's using it in a far more musical, to my ear, and melodic way. If you don't know this album, it's well worth checking out. Fantastic tunes like Morning Star and Message in a Dream, and a brilliant cover version of While My Guitar Gently Weeps. And he is a very, very soulful player, and he kind of marries that soulful element with the stunning technical ability. And it's one of the few albums, if not the only album, from this subgenre of guitar playing that really does move me. And it just sounds good whether you're into playing, into listening to fast whittly guitar or not. It's just musically a good album. Yes, it sounds a bit dated. You can tell it was recorded in the 80s because it's got those kind of 80s production values, but there's nothing wrong with being a product of your time. So yeah, there you go. Vinnie Moore, Time Odyssey, fantastic album. And, I shouldn't really love it, but I do. And that concludes the list for today, folks. Let me know if you have a similar list of your own albums that you shouldn't really like on paper because they don't really fit into your usual wheelhouse musically, but there's something about them that just kind of reaches you. I'd be interested to know what those are. And that's pretty much all I've got for you today, folks. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell if you haven't already done so, and why not give me a like while you're at it. Don't forget the 5 p.m. Live stream on Friday, 5 o'clock UK time. We have a bit of a beer and a chat, and it's a fantastic way of kicking off the weekend. Hope to see some of you there. And as always, if you're thinking of getting yourself a rather wonderful Fret Zealot tuition aid, then use the discount code you can see on screen and the purchase link in the description, and you'll get a little bit of money knocked off. You're welcome. And that's all I've got for you today, folks. Stay well, stay safe, and above all, stay sane. Bye for now.